Thomas.
Hey, what's up, man? Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to see you, and you're very welcome here at Streetwise Guitar. You are a virtually unknown, but hopefully a very shortly to be known, if you could follow that, fusion guitarist that I think everybody who is into that kind of music should know. The way I first heard about you was from Brett Stein, who said, "Hey, you have to check out my student Thomas Dawson and check out his band Animal Situation." How would you describe your band? And also tell me, like, what's the setting? What's the instrumentation?
So, I mean, I guess you could call it jazz fusion, right? It's basically improvised music. Most of the songs we play, we just treat them as vehicles for improvisation. It's really just all focused on the improvising. And we're really just a trio right now. So guitar, bass, drums. On the recording, we had some saxophone, a couple saxophone solos on some tracks just to kind of change it up so it wasn't just guitar every time.
Killer saxophone solos, I might
add. Yeah, man. That's Chase Baird. Everybody needs to go check him out. He's a killer New York tenor player. I think he studied with Michael Brecker. You can hear that in his playing. I mean, he sounds like Brecker mixed with Potter. He's incredible.
That you have done that there are no fusion guitarists improvising fusion guitarists, and we'll get to what I mean by that in a moment. But what they haven't done was been able to apply the Allan Holdsworth language. I mean, I can think of a few players that are great at using Holdsworth licks, but as I said in the Brett Stein interview, after they're done with the lick, there's nothing. They're back to, conventional harmony and a conventional approach. So how did you do it? Like, how did you integrate that into your improvisation?
Well, I have to really kind of thank Brett for that, for kind of coming up with the whole approach to kind of deriving that whole sound. But even before that, it's really the fundamentals that we all kind of learn is just learning how to highlight chord changes on a very basic level and learning how to highlight specific sounds against changes. Having that foundation is really the key to it, because at the very core of what I believe Holdsworth was doing was he was playing changes, and he was highlighting very kind of harmonically advanced sounds against certain chords. So having that foundation is really the key to all of it. And then when you kind of integrate these sounds that you're not as familiar with, that's all you're doing is you're integrating some of these scales, and you're applying them in the same way you'd apply any other scale, but now you're just getting sounds that you haven't heard before. And then when you kind of add the whole Holdsworthian technique legato thing, 3 note per string skipping and stuff, you're just kind of get into that sound without ever really having to just, oh, here's a Holdsworth lick. You can kind of derive vocabulary in the style of Holdsworth and not really just, oh, here's a Holdsworth line and now that's over. Now I got nothing.
I think that you're an old school fusion player, and what I mean by that is you can actually improvise, because there are a gaggle of modern fusion players on Instagram and YouTube, and you can tell that they're not really well versed in improvisation. And I know that you study jazz, and I'm curious how you integrate that with this modern language, and why is it so important?
Well, kind of like what I was saying earlier, it's the foundation of everything that I do. And I think from the very beginning, I was always trying to improvise. From the time I picked up a guitar and just learned how to play a note on the guitar, I was trying to improvise things. I mean, the thing that made me want to play guitar was guitar solos. I played Guitar Hero before I played guitar, and it just made me obsessed with the sound of a guitar solo and, and improvised guitar solos. So at the very core of it, I was trying to improvise from the very beginning. But having that foundation of, like I said, being able to play over chord changes in a very clear way, that's the foundation for everything for me. So like when I integrate this, I guess, this other kind of non-traditional vocabulary, I'm integrating it in the same exact way. So like, say like everybody, when you learn how to play melodic minor, everybody plays, melodic minor up a half step on a dominant chord. It gives them an altered sound. When they learn the diminished scale, they play it on a dominant chord, and it gives them a flat 9 natural 13 sound. It's the same thing with this. I take Mason mode 3, and I want to play over a 2-5-1 in C. I'm going to play C mode 3, and what that's going to give me is like an A flat minor 7 chord against G7, which is going to give you like a G7 altered sound. It's also going to give you just a major third cycle starting in C. So you kind of have like a Coltrane change kind of sound built into that. And just understanding that application is how I apply it. And I think about it in the same way I think about traditional jazz vocabulary. This device derives this sound, and you just got to know how to get inside the sound and get outside of the sound. And like I said, the whole foundation of that for me was studying jazz music and just practicing arpeggiating chord changes, using learning how to use chromaticism like a jazz player, learning how to land on the third of a chord, learning how to voice lead through changes. That's the foundation. That's the core of it all. And that's what makes this stuff actually work.
How would a beginner that is just dipping their toe into drop note scales and 9-note scales, how would you guide them to make sense out of it so they can launch their own voice?
Like, what's a good example of what you could do to start off with?
Yeah, like how would you start off?
I guess the very first thing I would do is, most people know how to play a C major scale, right? I'm hoping anyways.
Yes.
If you don't, you need to learn how to play C major scale first. First thing I would do is I would add A flat into that scale. And then that's going to give me what's called the 6th diminished scale, or the Barry Harris scale, or the major bebop scale. And then I would just think about it like that. I'm playing the major scale and I'm adding one note into it. And then you got to think about all the harmony that adds. Now all of a sudden you have A harmonic minor, you have C major, you have C harmonic major, you have all the chords derived from all those scales built into one scale now. And then you practice just developing vocabulary, just adding one single note. And then when you get comfortable with that, add E flat. Now you have a Holdsworth scale. I think it's scale 12. He calls it jazz major, add flat 3, flat 6, right? And then you think about all the harmony that one extra note adds. And then any situation you would have used a C major scale in, you can then use this scale. And you just try to build vocabulary inside the scale. Like, I think a really important thing to do is write etudes for yourself.
Oh, cool.
With this material. That's how I've derived all my pretty much 99% of my vocabulary is either etudes Brett has written for me or etudes I've written for myself inside of these scales. And just exploring, like there's different levels to it, like I'll just take a scale, write down the notes on a piece of paper, and figure out every triad, every different 7th chord, everything I can find inside that scale. And I just work with that information and try to derive vocabulary for it. And then, the application side of it. Okay, I'm going to take this tune, or whatever tune it might be. And when I get to this part, I'm going to play this scale over that chord. And you force yourself to do that, to try to get that vocabulary into your playing. And you just start small like that. And eventually, it'll kind of seep into your playing like that.
Now, rhythmically, you know how like when you learn the major bebop scale, they want the sharp 5, the jazz commandants want the sharp five on the upbeat,
Yeah.
and it allows all the other tones to fall on downbeats. Are you really concerned about like where this chromatic tone is happening in terms of rhythm?
Like a jazz player, then yeah, I'm concerned about it. But if I'm using it from this perspective where I'm building kind of like cool sounding shapes that integrate that note into it, I'm not really concerned with that, because I'm more thinking of it as just implying a sound against a chord, you know?
Yes. Yes.
And there's so many different ways of like building really cool, interesting arpeggio shapes that just, it's kind of just like I said, you're hearing like a superimposed sound against a chord. So I'm not really thinking about it in that terms, unless I'm wanting to use it as like a passing tone kind of thing.
I'm sure at this point people have paused this video to go listen to Animal Situation and have come back, and or if not, they're going to do it now. And I could see people saying, "Oh well, this sounds like Allan Holdsworth, or this sounds like Scott Henderson." And when I speak with you, my sense is that you have a very clear vision of who you are musically. So did you ever have any concerns about people saying, "Oh, you sound like a clone of this person or that person"?
I've honestly never really cared about that. From the very beginning, I've always wanted to model my sound of who my influence was at the time. So in the very beginning, I wanted to sound like Randy Rhoads. Then I wanted to sound like Jimi Hendrix. Then I wanted to sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan. And I wanted to sound like Robin Ford. And I wanted to sound like Charlie Parker. I wanted to sound like John Coltrane. I wanted to sound like Tim Miller. You know, the list goes on and on. But the beauty is you don't really have to worry about that. You're never going to sound like those guys, no matter how hard you try. You're your own individual person, and you have different influences, and they're all going to come out, and you're just never going to sound, as hard as you try, you're never going to sound like Holdsworth. So I've never really been worried about that. And I understand that developing your own sound on the instrument takes a long time. And I'm totally cool with, you know, that however long that process takes. If it's well into my 30s, my 40s, my 50s, it doesn't matter to me. If somebody tells me I sound like Holdsworth, I'll take that as a compliment, because that's the greatest guitar player on the planet to me, you know? So I'm cool with that. If they can hear where my stuff came from, that's a compliment to me. You know, it doesn't bother me. Like I said, you're never going to sound like anybody else. And if people do think, oh, you sound just like so-and-so, then they just can't hear that, you know?
Right. And
ears to tell, no, it doesn't really sound like that.
You know? It doesn't. Yeah. I can clearly hear the influences, but it doesn't sound like Allan. It doesn't sound like Scott. It sounds like you. That's what I think.
I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. So things that sound like Allan are, as we all know, put overdrive plus legato.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are instantly gonna draw that comparison if you're playing with overdrive and playing legato.
Yeah. Yep, it's happened to me before, and I didn't sound anything like Allan.
Yeah.
So, but speaking about legato, can you tell me about your legato technique and how you execute your lines?
So legato for me is something that always just came very naturally for me. Like I just kind of fell into it. Like at first, when I first started playing, I tried to pick every single note, and I really tried hard at trying to develop that. No matter what, I really can't. That just doesn't work for me, and I really don't even like the sound of it, to be honest with you. So naturally, before I ever analyzed my technique or knew what was going on with it or anything, I would add in these kind of strategic hammer-ons and pull-offs to make lines flow better for me and playing at tempos that I could actually play at and want to play it. So I was just doing that naturally, and then I realized, oh man, I kind of like the sound of that. And when I kind of started really breaking down just how I played scales, it was really like if I'm playing a 3-note per string scale, most of the time I do pick, hammer. So when I change strings, it's always a hammer-on or a pull-off before the string change.
Okay. So you do pick, hammer, ascending, and then pick, pull, descending?
Yeah. Yeah. And then if things get really fast, I typically just pick the string change.
Ah, okay.
Everything's a hammer on or a pull off on the way down.
What about the idea that people think, oh, well, Alan had enormous hands, so I need massive hands to be able to do this kind of thing?
I mean, I don't think that really matters. Like, I mean, pretty much what I could want to, what I'd want to be able to execute on the guitar lengthwise, I can pretty much do. There's some certain chord voicings I wish I could play. Maybe bigger hands would help with that. But you got to think that Alan was playing these types of stretched out chord voicings from a very young age, and I think that's way more important. I mean, I've seen people with short, stubby hands not have any issues at all. I don't think that really matters. I think you just have to practice the technique, and you'd be surprised at what you can accomplish.
Yeah, I always think that one of the most amazing things about Alan, aside from all the other stuff that he was amazing, is that how low he wore the guitar
Yeah.
and was still able to do all that stuff that, we have to wear like a bow tie,
Yeah, no, that freaks me out,
and
man. It's not, it doesn't look like it's very hard for him either. He's just executing it like nothing, man. And it's all down here. It's just like, good Lord,
yeah.
man. I don't, yeah. He's a
No,
freak.
yes, for absolutely. Earlier when we were speaking, you talked about the Tim Miller 212 method. And how do you apply that to what it is that you do?
Yeah, so, and I should be very clear with this. I haven't gotten super deep into exactly how Tim Miller applies or teaches 212. I just took the literal idea of two notes on a string, one note on a string, and two notes on a string. And I would try to build shapes from that because that just worked with my technique really well. And I was able to kind of play that pretty easily. So I would just take scales and I wouldn't even really worry about like playing exact arpeggios, like, oh, these exact notes have to be. I would just take scales and I would just think two notes on this string, one note on this string, two notes on this string. And I would try to just derive interesting sounds from that. And for the most part, you can come up with some very interesting arpeggios, very interesting ideas that you can just blaze through really fast. And like I said, it just works out from my playing. It's just always flowed. And I really like the way it sounds too.
You told me also that you were a blues player when you were when you were kind of cutting your teeth on just playing. And aside from going out and playing blues jam sessions, you were essentially playing live a lot.
Yeah.
What has that done for your playing, and how important do you think that is?
I think that's I think it's very important. I think that's critical for your playing. I was very lucky. My dad is a musician. My
Oh,
dad's a drummer, and he turned me on to a lot of things that I don't think I ever would have heard without him. I mean, when I was very little, he would have like Dave Weckl band playing in the truck, you
wow.
know, and anything Vinny Colaiuta was on, I was listening to that at a very young age. But when I started playing guitar, I had an outlet to play live. Like I remember learning Little Wing. You know, everybody knows Little Wing, Jimi Hendrix tune. And my dad said, "Hey, I think I was playing guitar for like a year. He's like, hey, we're playing a gig tonight. You're gonna come out. You're gonna sit in. You're gonna play Little Wing. We're gonna play it for me." So, and that was huge for me. It was a completely different experience than just playing in your bedroom. And then he always just facilitated, finding jam sessions around town and taking me to jams. I mean, we were going to like 3 to 4 jams a week, blues jams. Um, and man, that's just not something you can practice for in your bedroom. It's a completely different experience playing with other musicians and you learn how, oh man, I played with this drummer this night, and then the next night I played with a different drummer and it felt completely different. Or this
Right.
rhythm section feels completely different. They bring different things out of you. And I thought I was just very fascinated with that. And you can't get that experience from playing with a backing track. So it was huge for me, man. Just kind of learn, going through the ring. And then I've always played in bands, and I played in a bunch of top 40 bands 5 to 6 nights a week. And just having that outlet, man, was huge for me. I would not be the same player without that.
Do you feel like this kind of music is very chops oriented, fusion music? Like you
Yeah.
can't not have facility and want to excel playing modern jazz. If you let's just call it like modern jazz as a kind of
Yeah.
a very, very wide umbrella.
Yeah.
Um, so how how do you build your technique so you can play those fast passages and such?
So for me, I can kind of just speak from my experience. There's a few ways of going through, obviously, just um, going through scale exercises, playing scales up and down with the metronome. But if you're talking specifically about legato, I think you have to think about legato not as just throwing the pick away and doing all hammer-ons and pull-offs and moving my fingers as fast as possible, and then rhythm goes completely out the window. I think you have to work very hard on nailing subdivisions with the legato technique. So you have to really play eighth notes, triplets, 16th notes, quintuplets, different odd groupings, and really try to get inside those subdivisions and play those consistently with that legato technique, and try to really make sure you're making every note the same length, trying to make the pick no louder than the hammer-ons and the pull-outs. It's really hard to do. I'm not saying I'm an expert at it. I'm still working it all out. But also learning legato solos. Like one of the best things that developed my technique was learning a Holdsworth solo all the way through. I learned Texas all the way through, and it took me like 6 months or something. But learning that solo all the way through, and Brett worked really hard with the fingering on that to actually make it sound like how Holdsworth would have fingered it, or that's a big part of it too. And just taking the time to really work through that solo and work it up to speed. I mean, that completely transformed my technique. And so then when I went back to just playing other things, all of a sudden, oh man, I can play 16th notes at this tempo, and I can really lock into the time with this legato thing. So doing the exercises with the metronome and learning solos, man, learning a lot of solos, and then learning other solos, like learn saxophone solos, but then use your legato fingerings to come up with a system for how you're going to play those. I mean, saxophone solos are great because as you know, saxophone players have way better technique than guitar players, right?
Yes.
We're trying to learn some of those lines, but then come up with a fingering that's gonna work for that. I mean, that's huge, man. That's how you kind of learn the neck too in your own unique way.
Yeah, and what was that solo that you did? The sax player,
Oh,
Jay?
that little short or whatever, that was Chad LB, of course, a
Oh,
giant.
Chad, I'll be.
That's kind of a good example of what I'm talking about, where it's like, I mean, that was playing on a saxophone originally, so you don't really have a fingering idea, so you have to come up with your own fingerings. And I just think about what works for my technique, and what can I make work, how can I play these lines at that tempo and make it sound fluid and smooth how I like it to sound. So it's a great exercise to do.
When I first met you, I had an instantly great rapport with you. And when I first heard your music, I was instantly amazed. And I find that although your music's introspective and it can be dense at times, it's not dark or brooding. And so to me, I mean, I could be very presumptuous here by saying it sounds like you have a pretty healthy relationship with music, would you say?
So I would be lying if I said it was all sunshine and roses, man. Some days it's amazing. It's everything I want it to be when things are really flowing and I'm feeling creative. I write a cool tune or whatever. I'm like, oh man. Other days I want to sell all my shit and just forget I even played guitar. But
Right.
but music is I'm constantly thinking about music, thinking about what the next step is going to be. And most of my frustration with music comes from the actual instrument itself, just trying to make the guitar sound the way I want it to sound. I mean, like I never had that problem until I got into jazz music, and then I fell in love with the sound of the saxophone. And I was like, oh my God, this instrument is way cooler than the guitar. Just, breathing through something to create
Right.
a percussive attack. Um, and Brett said something really funny, man, because we both share this struggle. He was saying horn players are the kings of melody,
Mhm.
and piano players are the kings of harmony, and then guitar players just suck. So it's like I really feel that, man. The guitar is a really difficult instrument to learn this type of stuff on.
Yes.
So it's a big struggle from a tonal perspective, And then from just learning all the material, man, it's so much harder than it has to be. I mean, you look at a piano is like this long and just repeats in octaves.
Right.
You know what I mean? I have a saxophone. I've been dabbling in tenor saxophone. And dude, I have way more fun practicing saxophone than I do guitar, even though I suck. You know, like the sound is all self-contained, and I can just walk around my house and I play the saxophone and it sounds beautiful and it's fun, you know. And if I could play the sax like I play guitar, I don't know if I'd play guitar. Because I really try to look at music is what I'm trying to do, and the instrument really is just a tool. You know, that's really how I try to look at it these days.
How long does it take you to print a solo?
Oh man. So when we recorded these tunes, we recorded it all live in the same room. And, you know, we took 3 takes of every song, and that was that. We took, we thought, oh, this is cool. I was prepared to live with it, you know? And then my bass player went home. He's like, I want to do some stuff from home. I'm going to just kind of punch in a few things. He re-recorded all his bass stuff from home, and he locked in with the drums in a certain way and did some stuff. I was like, oh man, okay. It made me go home, and it made me want to re-record every guitar part. Oh. And so that's what I did. And then that opened up just Pandora's box, man. So like I was probably in here for at least a month, 10 to 12 hours a day recording solos. Not to say I couldn't live with a lot of those, but I really tried to nerd out and spend a lot of time and come up with something I could be really proud of.
No, do you teach online?
So I don't really do much online teaching. I'm definitely open to it. If you want to send me an email, I'll definitely look into it. I teach locally at this store called the Guitar Sanctuary in McKinney, which is basically Dallas. I basically live in Dallas because nobody knows where Melissa or McKinney is. And I teach 5 days a week there. But I'm open to it. You know, I just not something I regularly do though.
Great. Well, I hope that you get at least 25 students from this video and wanting to study with you and learn this language that you are so deft at playing. It's very, very cool. I think that as far as modern fusion guitar and the big names that we all know of, the only reason why your name isn't there is just because you've been keeping it on the down low. And I think that now that I have availed you to the world.
Well, man, I really appreciate that, man. That means a lot coming from a player like you, man. It really,
thanks.
really does mean a lot.
I really appreciate that, those kind of words. I think I'm gonna record it and like listen to it over and over for the next week. So before we go, what is next for Animal Situation?
A lot of recording, hopefully a lot of new music. Hopefully in the next couple of months. I don't really want to put a date on it because I don't, you know, these things you say, oh, it's going to be out here, and then it could be like 2 years, who knows. But we're set up to record now. Basically every time we get together and rehearse, we can record everything. We can record ideas. My drummer can just basically record drum tracks and send them to me, and then I can play over them and stuff. So we're set up to do a lot of recording now. But hopefully in the next couple of months, we're working on a tune, a single that's kind of like a fusiony metal 7-string kind of thing, but then has a really cool like Holdsworthian solo section. I'm really, really excited about it. Hopefully we release that pretty soon. I think it's going to be cool. And then just a lot of new music, man. I want to write. I really want to explore my voice as a composer, because that's not something I've done a lot of. And just a lot of new music and playing, man, and further exploration of all these concepts for myself. I'm still very much a student of all these things.
You've set the bar very high for people playing modern fusion. To be making that kind of music when you were like, what was it, like you were 26 and a half or something like that when you finished that record?
Yeah, I was 26 when that was done.
Yep. Okay, I'll be packing up my stuff.
Well, man, dude, you just go on YouTube now and everybody's shredding right out of the womb these days, man.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, dude, we're like living in the freaking age of information. I mean, dude, just go look up Troy Grady's videos, and then you can have information that you could never dream of. You know? Exactly.
Man, we could talk for another 40 minutes, and we certainly have in the past. The third time is a charm, as I was saying. Yeah. But anyways, Thomas, I really hope to hear from you soon. As soon as that tune comes out, send it to me. If it's in a video form, I'll make it a short for my channel and help promote you. I believe in what you do, and I really hope that those who have stuck to the end of this interview will invest in you by following you and buying your record, or at the very least, you know, playing it 1 billion times on Spotify so you can make your 37.5 cents.
Yeah.
So
well, I really appreciate it, man. I've watched a lot of the interviews you do on here, man, and it's just an honor to be doing this, man. I really do appreciate it.
Thomas, mind yourself. Take care.